Once upon a time, in the heart of the lively village of Akum, two names were known from one end of the town to the other, and these names were Chinedu and Abiola. To call these two boys mischievous would be an understatement. They were a walking disaster. Chinedu and Abiola had grown up thriving in the close-knit warmth of Akum. The villagers had watched the boys transform from toddling infants to troublesome teenagers, and by the time they were 15, everyone knew them as the stubborn boys. Chinedu, the taller of the two, had a lean frame and quick darting eyes that betrayed his ever-scheming mind. Abiola, on the other hand, was stoical with a laugh so infectious it could disarm even the sternest elder, at least until he played his next prank. Together, they were as inseparable as they were incorrigible. Known collectively as the stubborn boys, they had perfected the art of sneaking, lying and scurrying out of punishment, like eel slipping through fingers. The trouble they stirred was legendary, a constant source of exasperation and amusement among the villagers. In the quiet early hours of dawn, they once painted Auntie Ajoa's rooster with a bright blue paint, causing her to believe her fowl had been possessed by a witch or an evil spirit. Another time, they slipped a handful of peppers into the village elder's stew, leaving the poor man red-faced with teary-eyed for the rest of the evening. But the villagers knew their limits, and so did Chinedu and Abiola. For every prank they pulled, they took care not to truly harm anyone, or at least not to harm them too much. Yet, their antics meant they were always on the watch for suspicious glances from the adults, and sometimes a raised eyebrow from Mama Esi, the sharp-eyed woman who ran the liveliest bar in Akum. One of their most notorious antics happened on the day Mama Esi asked them to fetch palm wine from the neighboring village. Mama Esi, a stout woman with a loud laugh and an even louder voice, owned the most popular bar in Akum, known for serving the freshest and sweetest palm wine in the region. Each evening, villagers gathered at her establishment, drawn not only by the drink but by the warmth and cheer that Mama Esi exuded. The bar was more than a place to drink. It was the heart of the village's social life. Farmers discussed the harvest and young men exchanged stories of the week's exploits. Mama Esi's laughter was often the loudest, punctuating stories and creating an atmosphere that drew even the weariest traveler. So, when she asked Chinedu and Abiola to handle the task of fetching palm wine from the neighboring village, she was putting more trust in them than anyone thought wise. But Mama Esi believed that every young person deserved a chance to prove themselves. Mama Esi's bar was not just the place to enjoy the best palm wine. It was a sacred meeting ground for the village. That night, she was expecting a large crowd, as the previous day's rains had brought relief to the farmers, making it a perfect evening to celebrate and unwind. She had asked Chinedu and Abiola, despite their reputation, to fetch the wine from a neighboring village known for its rich, sweet palm wine tapped directly from the tall raffia palms. Chinedu and Abiola, feeling important and slightly proud of themselves, had set off on the errand with unusual enthusiasm. The walk to the neighboring village was scenic, the footpath winding through hills and small streams, surrounded by towering palms and thick groves of plantain trees. The air was warm and slightly humid, filled with the scent of moist earth and flowers in bloom. Along the way, Chinedu glanced at Abiola with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Hey," he began, "do you think Mama Esi trusted us? I mean, really trust us?" Abiola shrugged, though his grin betrayed his excitement. "She knows we are the only ones bold enough to handle this job," he replied, feigning confidence. "Imagine what the villagers would do without us." Chinedu nodded, his mind already spinning with ideas. As they approached the large palm trees of the neighboring village, They spotted the tappers carefully pouring the fresh, cloudy wine into the calabashes for the evening's festivities. Soon enough, they received a hefty calabash filled to the brim with a drink, its sweet, slightly fermented aroma wafting up invitingly. With the prized calabash in hand, they began their return journey, but temptation got the better of them sooner than they had expected. After walking a short distance, Chinedu felt thirsty, and the thought of quenching that thirst with a sip of the fresh palm wine came to mind. "Abiola, I am thirsty," he said. "I will take only a small sip of this palm wine to quench my thirst a little bit." He took the first sip, convincing himself that he was just tasting to check if the wine was indeed fresh or not. After walking another short distance, Abiola followed quickly. "Chinedu, me too, I will take a small sip. Just a small one, no," Abiola said, taking his first sip. But before they realized, their sips turned into gulps and then into an all-out drinking spree. The palm wine had a pleasant flavor that went down smoothly, and the boys laughed as they swinged from the calabash, mimicking the adult villagers they had seen at Mama Esi's bar. "Chinedu, I am Superman. I am super strong and I can fly like an eagle," Abiola said. "As for me, I am Flash. I am so fast that the villagers can never catch me when they chase after me," Chinedu also added, intoxicated by the wine. The two boys stumbled along the path, the sun beginning to fall behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape. By the time they reached the outskirts of Akum, their feet were unsteady, and the once brimming calabash was nearly empty. Abiola peered inside, his eyes widening in mock horror. "What do we do now?" he asked, slurring slightly. Chinedu, always the quick thinker, immediately came up with an idea. "Simple. We'll refill it with river water, yes, and a small pinch of salt. Mama Esi won't know the difference." With the utmost seriousness, they filled the calabash with river water, adding some salt solution for authenticity. Satisfied with their mixture, they staggered back to Mama Esi's bar, presenting her with the calabash as if it was the most precious cargo. Mama Esi, busy preparing for the evening crowd, didn't think to check the contents. She praised the boys for their efficiency and even tipped them with a few coins for their honest work, which they pocketed with barely disguised glee. As the evening wore on, the bar began to fill with patrons. Farmers dusted from the day's work and young men freshly bathed for the evening gathered around, chatting and sharing news. Mama Esi greeted everyone warmly, pouring the first marks of palm wine with her signature flourish. The villagers raised their caps, some offering toasts, others simply smiling with anticipation. But the moment they took a sip, expressions soared, and murmurs of confusion spread across the room. "Pweh! What in the world is this?" A burly farmer spluttered, spitting out the drink. "It tastes like river water," cried another, his face twisting in disgust. Mama Esi, horrified, tasted the wine herself. The salty, insipid liquid hit her tongue, and she barely managed to keep her composure. Her face turned red as she realized she'd been tricked. By the time she looked up, the bar was getting empty, with patrons leaving in disappointment and mild disgust. Mama Esi's reputation hung by a thread, and she knew exactly who was to blame. Clutching her broom, she stormed out of the bar, her voice echoing across the village as she bellowed. "Chinedu, Abiola, you boys better run no. Pray I never see you in this village, cause when I do, you two will not like me at all." Despite the villagers' uproar over the salty river water palm wine, Chinedu and Abiola's spirits remained undimmed. The next morning, with the first light of dawn, they slipped out of their houses to pull another prank. They crept through the village, passing houses as quietly as possible, until they reached Auntie Efia's line of freshly washed clothes. Auntie Efia, the beautiful wife of Babatunde, was known for her meticulous housekeeping, and her laundry line was always impeccably neat, the clothes fluttering in the early morning breeze. Among the freshly landed items hung her underwear. The boys smirked at each other as they carefully removed this article and strolled over to Chris's yard, hanging it on his drying line. Chris, a young bachelor known for his quiet and somewhat shy demeanor, had recently drawn the attention of several girls in the village, and the two stubborn boys had heard the whispers and rumors of which ones might catch his eye. Auntie Efia's husband, Babatunde, on the other hand, was a man known for his quick, jealous spirit. He was the kind of man that would get easily jealous upon seeing even his friends making his wife laugh. And so, seeing his wife's underwear on another man's drying line would be World War III. Sure enough, later that day, Auntie Efia's husband, Babatunde, arrived home from a trip he had gone on a week ago and froze at the sights before him. His wife's underwear on Chris's line? Rage flooded his face, and being the jealous man he is, his suspicions grew wild. At first, he thought his wife might have used Chris's line since theirs was fully occupied. But when he returned to his compound, he found it practically spacious. Being a very jealous person, he concluded Chris was having an affair with his wife. Outraged, he stormed over to Chris's house, pounding furiously on the door. Chris opened the door and stepped out, rubbing his eyes, completely unprepared for what awaited him. Before he could say a word, Babatunde's hand shot out, delivering a slap that nearly sent Chris flying into space. "How dare you? Oh, you think you can steal my wife, Abi? Ah, you must be joking." Babatunde's voice was booming, loud enough to draw neighbors from their houses to witness the commotion. The crowd began to gather, their murmurs of shock and scandal growing louder by the second. Some people gasped in horror, while others hid mouths behind their hands, trying to suppress their amusement. "Do you think I don't see what's going on? Hey, you don't know who I am, oh. You don't know who you are messing with. Do you know me? Do you know my name? Do you know where I come from? Hey, you are playing with fire. Hot fire. I fought with Angel Michael some years ago and broke his nose. As for you, I will break your nose, break your teeth, break your legs, your arms. I will give you fatality like Mortal Kombat." Babatunde said, his voice ringing with conviction as he shouted accusations of infidelity and betrayal. Chris, bewildered and now thoroughly embarrassed, could barely get a word in. "Babatunde, he stammered, his face turning bright red. Meanwhile, hidden behind a nearby hut, Chinedu and Abiola could hardly contain their laughter, clutching their sides as they watched the scene unfold. They could hardly breathe, the laughter spilling out of them in barely muffled bursts. The chaos was even more satisfying than they had hoped. The commotion continued until, at last, Auntie Efia emerged, furiously snatching her laundry from Chris's line. She scolded Babatunde, reprimanding him for jumping to conclusions, all the while casting suspicious glances at the onlookers who seemed to be enjoying the spectacle far too much. Despite the fallout from these pranks, Chinedu and Abiola didn't feel a shred of remorse. They considered themselves untouchable, immune to the consequences of their actions. However, even they knew to avoid Oluman Kabiru, the reclusive elder who lived at the village's edge. Oluman Kabiru was a solitary figure, spending his days in his small rundown hut surrounded by strange plants and animals, His compound was cluttered with clay pots, dry herbs, and the bones of animals no one seemed brave enough to approach. Chief among his possessions was his enormous foul-smelling goat. The creature, with its mussed fur and red beady eyes, was the bane of every passerby. Stories about the goat were numerous. Villagers said it could curse you with a single bleat, or that its stare alone was enough to cause illness. Chinedu and Abiola had always scoffed at their stories, brushing them off as superstitions. But the rumor of the goat's tender meat had persisted for years, and it sparked their curiosity. One day, after hours of urging each other on, they decided they would sneak into Oluman Kabiru's compound and claim the goat for themselves. Under the cover of darkness, they tiptoed toward the Oluman's hut. The moon cast a pale glow over the yard, giving everything a silvery, eerie hue. The goat was tied to a post, standing quietly as if it was waiting for them. At first, it seemed to eye them knowingly, a look so sharp that it made them hesitate. But hunger and daring outweighed caution, and they quickly cut the rope, dragging the animal into the nearby woods. They slaughtered and grilled the goat, gagging at the smell but determined to taste its famous meat. As they ate, they laughed at the absurdity of Oluman Kabiru's reputation. The meat was delicious, and by the end of the night, they were sure they had just pulled off their greatest heist. The next day, however, strange things began to happen. At first, everything seemed normal, but as the morning wore on, people began wrinkling their noses and turning away. Some muttered under their breath, while others covered their faces in disgust. Chinedu and Abiola were baffled until they caught a whiff of themselves. Their skin and clothes had absorbed the goat's overwhelming stench, which had now become a part of them. Thinking it might just be their clothes, the two rushed home and showered, but the stench would not go. It had become a part of them. Their confidence crumbled as they watched villagers recoil. Friends avoid them, and even family members refused to let them indoors. Panic set in. They scrubbed themselves with soaps, herbs, and anything they could find, but nothing worked. It was as if the goat's odor had seeped into their very bones. Days passed, and the boys grew desperate. Exhausted and humiliated, they finally approached Oluman Kabiru, begging for mercy. The Oluman welcomed them with a sly smile, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Ah, my favorite thieves, how are you enjoying my goat? Tell me, was the meat sweet, sweeter, or sweetest?" Chinedu and Abiola stammered apologies, pleading with him to lift the curse. They swore they would never steal again, their spirits broken. Oluman Kabiru raised an eyebrow, considering. If you want the curse to be lifted, there is a price. Bring back my goats, alive and whole." The boys stared at him in horror. They had eaten every last morsel of the animal, and resurrecting it was impossible. Realizing the hopelessness of their situation, Chinedu and Abiola hung their heads in defeat, knowing they would be known forever as the smelling, stubborn boys. For years to come, the villagers would tell the tale of Chinedu and Abiola, a warning that some misdeeds leave marks that even time can never erase. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like this. God richly bless you. Catch you in the next video.